someone that was drafted after him, Caleb Lamavita, but got more money than him. And ultimately, the way in which a little like how the sausage is made, we do value signing bonuses. And if it is a tiebreaker, Luke Dickerson, he got $3.8 million in the second round, which is well above slot, while Caleb Lamavita got 2.3, which is kind of it slot adjacent, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But Luke Dickerson, technically a shortstop, but I think he's going to move to second base or move to the outfield. And another great report by Tyler Jennings. Shout out to him. He does all our fantastic draft work and everything like that. Hey, he leads that team really well. It's like an interesting collection of tools with Luke Dickerson. It's above average power. It's well above average speed. I think it's plus speed at the end of the day. If he ends up at second base, it might be an above average glove. If he ends up in center field, I think it's an average-ish glove. The arm is a little bit lacking. He kind of needs to wind up a little bit to get his throws off. So that makes shortstop kind of almost an impossibility unless the arm strength really takes a step forward. But it's a crazy tools like gamble for them, and I really like this. Like, I think they had a really good draft, by the way. We'll talk more about it as it progresses. But Luke Dickerson is one of my favorite little like gambles that they took.
Absolutely, couldn't say it better. I think that with Dickerson specifically, the thing that sticks out with me most is uh, at at the MLB draft weekend that we shared in Dallas and in Fort Worth. I heard Tyler saying something that he actually alluded to in his scouting blurb here. He has the chops to handle center field at the next level, even as an infielder, like Jackson Merrill did. And I think that that's particularly interesting because we saw Jackson Merrill kind of make the transition towards having some swing decision issues and turning that into, okay, how can I optimize my time at the plate and optimize my swing to get to my power to make my run tool matter. And again, if he could handle something in the infield and in the outfield, I think that's particularly interesting. I will call out another interesting thing about Luke Dickerson is that he was a multi-sport athlete in high school. He was helping his high school hockey team bring home a state championship. Shout out our boy Kyle Sontag on the Prospects Live team for pointing that out. I do think that now that he can focus solely on baseball, Dickerson is going to be a guy that we're looking at with a lot of interest headed into 2025. Dickerson was ranked number 44 overall on my first year player draft rankings that I did just about a week ago, and I'm a big fan of his and seeing what he could do going forward. I do think that his future is likely in the outfield, though.
Yeah, I think that his future is also in the outfield. And, how often do we get a hockey and baseball player? Like, I don't think we get that very often. I mean, if he has to drop the mitts, he might be more than qualified to do it. But yeah, let's hope not. But it's Luke Dickerson. It's just it's an interesting bunch of tools. And I think that there's a lot of ways in which it can go. I kind of like him a little bit more than like 44. Like, if we're in a draft together, I'll probably take him a little higher than that. I think he's a worthwhile gamble. But I also understand, there is some risk associated with him with some of the swing decision issues that kind of pop up here and there. But I think he's ultimately one of the more interesting gambles later in a first year player draft. I don't know if you agree with me on that or not.
In terms of him being a gamble later in player drafts, I think that honestly, if you make it past round two and Dickerson's on the board, you're making out like a bandit because he's automatically one of those very interesting players who could be. I mean, let's say in a year's time, Reese, we're looking at this draft again and we're like, oh my gosh, Luke Dickerson, Drew had him at 44. He's a top 15 guy in this class, bar none. After one good season in an org that we're seeing needs bats and are probably not going to be shy about if he's producing, why not move him up? I think that Dickerson is a player that we could absolutely see take that bump and be accelerated relatively quickly, even. I will say this just because we were talking about it a minute ago with Dickerson and about where he falls on the first year player draft. Excluding pitchers, he's number 25 for me. So you said a minute ago, there's biases with everyone. And of course, I love pitchers. I'm not shy about it. But Dickerson's a great player. And in first year player draft specifically, you're going to want to take that stab earlier than not because Reese is not the only fantasy player who is a big fan of what this young man could be potentially for the Washington Nationals.